Tonight, the cost of housing. Some private tenants are facing big rent increases as the Scottish Government's emergency cap on prices ends.
This is my house. I've still got a son. I'm responsible for him. I've been here for 5 years. What am I supposed to do?
Also making the headlines, CalMac's boss quits. The state-owned ferry operator is now looking for a new leader as it also struggles with its ageing fleets. Utterly unacceptable. Livingston hit out after unapproved banners were unfurled by Celtic fans.
And the Cold War bunker on the Clyde transformed from Scotland's last line of defence from nuclear attack to a tourist attraction.
I'm Vanessa Kennedy in Edinburgh.
And I'm Kellyanne Woodland in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. Sky-high rent rises and mass evictions. That's what unions are warning private tenants are facing after an emergency rent cap was lifted earlier this week. Living Rent is calling on the Scottish Government to extend the protections brought in to freeze rent during the cost of living crisis.
The Tenants' Rights Minister says renters do have powers to challenge landlords on rent hikes. Landlords, however, say the cap has done more harm than good. Here's our political reporter, Laura Alderman.
Lorraine's rented this flat near Wishaw for more than 5 years, and to her and her son, it's home. But soon, she says she'll be forced out after learning the landlord is raising her rent by 40%.
I thought it was outrageous, to be honest. It's not really manageable. I think in this current climate, to have an increase of 40% is really rough. It costs a lot. These flats are all electric flats with leaky, undouble glazed windows, so it's very, very drafty. So it is unaffordable, and I work full time.
She's tried to challenge the decision but says it's been stressful.
Even if they could have did it in stages, that would have been more manageable, or even using the Scottish Government calculator and putting a maximum of 12% on at a time. That's certainly manageable, and I have proposed that, but I've had nothing back. This is my house. I've still got a son. I'm responsible for him. I've been here for 5 years. What am I supposed to do?
A 3% cap on in-tenancy, rent increases and extra protections on evictions were introduced in 2022. Now that emergency legislation has been lifted, there's fears tenants will face big rent rises.
We've been hearing of members getting rent increases even before the rent cap. Obviously that was illegal, but now a lot of my friends, a lot of tenants I know are getting rent increases straight away. Some really high ones, some possibly able to go down a little bit more, but everybody's quite worried. And I think, if you get a really big rent increase, it feels like an eviction, really.
The Scottish Government says its new housing bill will keep homes affordable. In the meantime, tenants can dispute rent hikes through an adjudication process.
It was really important, though, that we don't have a cliff edge. I've had constituents telling me that they're being threatened with 50, 60, even 70% rent increases. That's unacceptable. That kind of extreme level of rent increase overnight would break the back of a household budget. So we've already put in temporary measures toward the end of the rent cap that will extend on a continual basis for as long as the Scottish Government and Parliament decide that it's proportionate and necessary in the circumstances.
The cap undoubtedly helped renters manage the cost of living crisis. But at the same time, landlords say their costs have gone up too, with many opting to either take their homes off the market completely or sell up.
They've seen increases to their buy-to-let mortgages, insurance costs, just everything across the piece. Like the rest of us, we've seen all those things go up. So for landlords, that's been no different for them. So for some, a little bit more hardship than others has been faced, given their own circumstances. But most of the support out there, certainly at the present time, is certainly in favour of the tenants. There's not much for landlords.
A housing emergency has been declared in 4 of Scotland's councils, although all are grappling with demand for homes being far bigger than the supply.
And Laura joins me now. Laura, are there enough protections in place for tenants at the moment?
Well, it depends who you ask. The Scottish Government would say yes. It says that renters here in Scotland have the strongest rights in the UK, and they say more protections are on the way as well with this new housing bill, which was introduced to Parliament last week. The bill is due to have its first debate before the summer recess, but of course this is a bill, this legislation, it's a lengthy process, and we are expecting significant pushback from landlords on this as well. There's a lot in the bill. It includes a long-term system of rent controls, new rights for tenants like the right to keep a pet or to decorate a rented home, and also stronger protections against evictions as well. But until that bill becomes law, it's very likely we'll hear more people like Lorraine in my report there who are really facing these ridiculously high rent hikes and also maybe feel like they can't challenge it either. Of course, we are still in the cost of living crisis, and for some people, sadly, things could be set to get worse.
OK, Laura, thanks very much for that.
The chief executive of the ferry operator CalMac is stepping down as the company faces ongoing challenges with its fleet. Robbie Drummond is leaving with immediate effect following a review by the CalMac board. It comes just over a week after the chief executive of the Ferguson Marine Shipyard was sacked. Here's our political correspondent, Ewan Petrie.
Well, this announcement from CalMac this afternoon did come out of the blue. Robbie Drummond has been under pressure due to delays and cancellations within the service, but that has been largely down to an ageing fleet. Only a few days ago, he was out visiting a community offering an apology for the disruption there. CalMac says the decision follows a review of its executive leadership and admits there are some challenging years ahead. But the fact is, whoever takes over from Robbie Drummond will face those same challenges. The biggest being resilience. There simply is no spare capacity within the fleet, and that will remain the case until these new ferries being built elsewhere come into service. Now, the Scottish Conservatives say the blame lies squarely with the Scottish Government. And I spoke to Graham Simpson shortly after he got off a CalMac ferry.
I think Robbie Drummond has been forced out. I would use the word fired. I think it's quite clear from the statement that's what's happened. Again, there's been no explanation as to why he's gone, what they're blaming him for. Robbie Drummond can't be blamed for the age of Scotland's ferries. That does not lie at his door. So I think we need, again, Barry McCallan to come forward and explain what exactly is going on here.
Well, the Scottish Government says decisions around the Chief Executive are a matter for the Chair and the Board. They have named Duncan Mackesson as the interim Chief Executive. One of his priorities will be the new ferry contract. Ministers are due to make a decision on that in the coming months. But all of this comes just over a week after the sacking of David Tideman, the Chief Executive of the Ferguson Marine Shipyard. 2 new ferries being built there are currently 6 years late and almost 4 times over budget. The second of those, the Glen Rosa, is due to be launched next week. Islanders and leadership teams here and at the yard need that launch to go smoothly.
Former Rangers manager Ali McCoist has backtracked on saying he would break new hate crime laws at this weekend's Old Firm game by now saying he won't even be at Ibrox. The former striker's criticism of the controversial law comes as it's understood almost 4,000 complaints were received by Police Scotland in the first 2 days of the bill being in force, as Alison McCallum reports.
It's an event where passions always run high. Former Rangers player and manager Ali McCoist suggested this weekend those passions could turn into law-breaking for him and thousands of others as he waded into the debate on the controversial hate crime law. But then quickly backtracked, saying he won't even be at the game.
See, people are accusing me of going to break this act, and I'm not even going to be at the game, which I thought I would be, but with a change of plans, so we're away for a couple of days. But
McCoist joins a list of public figures criticising the law, most prominently J.K. Rowling, who challenged to be arrested for views she shared on social media. Police Scotland clarified the Harry Potter author's language wouldn't be an offence. But STV News understands they are also now working through almost 4,000 complaints received since the law came into force on Monday.
It's people that have to look through these complaints. So that's police officers, and some civilian staff will also be involved in that. And if they're looking through these complaints, then they're not doing their other job or other work that may be required. So we always know in incidents like this will be a bigger burden.
It's not just the burden on officers that continues to be a concern for those with questions over the new offences.
I hope that no one is charged with a hate crime that shouldn't be, but the trouble is that it's the process that will be the punishment. It's just a maze.
But the First Minister, who's been a driving force of the bill from the outset, says it provides protections that were needed.
There's a lot of disinformation and misinformation flying around about the Hate Crime Act. A reminder that for the new offences that are created by the Act, the threshold for criminality is extremely high. Your behaviour has to be threatening or abusive and intended to stir up hatred. That's a very high threshold indeed. So look, this is not about people offending people or insulting people. It's a very, very high threshold for criminality indeed.
A challenging start for the new law, which is yet to face its first real test. Alison McCallum, STV News.
Now, as the rescue mission continues in Taiwan to find survivors of this morning's earthquake, a Scot has told STV News of their surreal experience during the event. People remain trapped in damaged homes and workplaces and underground in mines. The number killed and injured in the 7.3 magnitude quake is still not clear.
The floor's wobbling, the entire building's wobbling. Then it immediately got worse. And then all the locals went, we need to get outside, because they realised it was a bigger earthquake than expected. So we all went outside, and then all the cars in the car park are shaking, forklifts and everything's shaking, just sitting going, what on earth's happening, you know?
Now, Scotland's legal profession is on a collision course with campaigners for victims of sexual crimes over proposals to hold a pilot of juryless trials in rape cases.
The Law Society says the plan is flawed and lacks evidence to support it. But the charity Rape Crisis Scotland says the change would help improve the low rate of convictions. Here's our senior reporter, Gordon Cree.
Since her rapist was jailed, Hannah has spoken out about her experience of the legal system in the hope it will help others. Only around half of rape trials end in a conviction. It's more than 90% for criminal cases overall. And Hannah told me today she wonders to what extent that could be down to juries.
How does the decision whether guilty or not guilty come down to random people who have been plucked from the public, whereas standing in that room, the people in the room had all trained and were professionals and had earned their right to be there that day, whereas the public had just been picked and you have no idea what their preconceived mindsets are. They might have little to no understanding of how trauma works, how it impacts your body and your brain. They might not really have understanding of abusive relationships, coercive control. They might have still an old-fashioned view of what rape is. So I think, for me personally, if it was trauma-informed, trained, specialised judges, I think that would have a massive positive impact for future survivors.
The charity Rape Crisis Scotland has been pushing for a pilot of trials without a jury.
What we know is that people react differently to rape. Some don't fight back because of the impact of trauma. And for some women given evidence in court, the way of getting through that is to try not to be upset. So I think there's a real concern that juries are making decisions not based on the evidence, but based on attitudes or false assumptions they're bringing to bear. And what that could mean is guilty men walking free.
A Holyrood committee considering the issue was split along party lines, and the Law Society, which represents and regulates solicitors, has concerns about placing the decision on guilt solely in judges' hands.
The judiciary are generally more male than female, still to this day. They are mostly white, they are mostly older men, and all of those things mean that one man, which is what it probably would be, making a decision, compared with a number of people who, whether that's 12 or 15, because that of course is part of the proposals as well, whether the jury number would change, but it's a number of people who may be much more like the person who is being subjected to that trial after being accused of a particularly serious crime.
The measure is in the Scottish Government's Victims Bill, which is also set to bring in other changes, including scrapping the not proven verdict. The Justice Secretary has said she'll continue to listen to different voices and wants to build a consensus. Much of the procedure around how criminal trials are conducted in Scotland has been the same for decades, even centuries. Now, though, the prospect of significant change to the way things are done appears to be a matter of when rather than if. Gordon Cree, STV News, Edinburgh.
Well, let's take a look at other stories now. And 2 19-year-old women have been charged after videos of a toddler vaping were posted on social media. Police say the child is safe and well. The incident was also reported to East Ayrshire Council's Social Work Department. A 13-year-old boy has been charged after a bus driver was hit with a glass bottle in Paisley. McGill's buses said the incident took place on Gauze Street just after 8:30 last night after an altercation between the driver and a group of youths. The driver suffered a head injury but didn't require hospital treatment. Now, a father and son stamp collecting team from Glasgow have launched a new book aimed at celebrating the history of some of the country's rarest postage stamps. And the labour of love provides a snapshot of a world of collecting possibilities. Ollie Dickinson has this first-class report.
For more than 180 years, stamps have been used to pay for sending our mail. And from the humble but now valuable penny black, they've evolved to represent history, culture and creativity. This shop in Glasgow, run by father and son duo Gordon and Austin, holds one of the UK's largest collections.
There's very few stamp shops that are still around, but we're still here, been at it a long time. And people come in they come across albums, as people come across an album in the attic and they bring it in and we have a look at it. Some of the stories most of the stories are quite normal, a relative in the merchant navy of a previous generation and that sort of thing. But sometimes it's something, more interesting than that.
This office is a real Aladdin's cave with collections from around the world. Countries from St Lucia to St Kitts and Nevis, from Malta to the Maldives. And there's even stamps from places that might not exist anymore or have changed their name. For example, a gold star tonight for anyone who knows where Nyasaland is. As the oldest stamp shop in Scotland, it's well known, with locals and tourists alike popping in for a browse or evaluation. Today, it's Madeleine's turn. She's come from the Netherlands.
I really enjoy writing letters and I thought, well, might as well put a nice stamp on it. And I mean, you can, if you write something personal for someone, just think about what they like and there is a stamp for it. Well, I'm personally just into art and modern art, and there are a lot of modern art stamps. So if I see something that piques my interest, that's also a way to get to know some artworks because they put them on stamps sometimes.
Now they've produced a special collector's book where people can enjoy and be educated about the stamps that started it all.
It takes the concept, obviously, of the world's first stamps, which are the Ferry Black being the most famous, and it combines it in an album. It really came from an appreciation of the fact that it's kind of a milestone in our human communication, the history of our human communication. At the very start we had like fire signals, then you had messenger people, then you're making a leap forward via a postal system and the world shrinks all of a sudden.
The duo say the book promises a first-class experience that will deliver again and again for enthusiasts and casual viewers. Ollie Dickinson, STV News.
All right, sport now. No Rahman tonight. It's Ronnie.
No John either. Treat for us, isn't it? We're even matching with our ties and our dresses and everything.
Matching. Well, it's a question of matching or clashing, Ronnie.
Thanks very much. But the show goes on. Kellyanne, as ever, sport news and, of course, the fallout from the weekend's matches continues. Good evening. Livingston have launched an investigation after an unapproved banner from Celtic fans was displayed at their match on Sunday, despite permission being rejected. Meanwhile, after Livy were criticised for allowing 3 of the 4 stands to be filled with away supporters, David Martindale has hit back, saying the revenue generated is crucial for the club. As Livingston and Celtic walked out on Sunday, this was the banner that greeted them. A banner Livy say was not permitted in the ground and was smuggled in by Celtic fans. The club say discussions are underway to investigate to ensure it doesn't happen again. But they were also criticised for allowing away fans in 3 of the 4 stands. Today, David Martindale addressed the issue.
I
think it could have been dealt with better on Sunday, if I'm honest. I can't even remember the message as such, if I'm really honest with you. That's for people at the club to deal with, for Celtic to deal with, whatever happens at that point, the police, whatever it is. For me, in a purely footballing perspective, I would much rather have a full stadium. The club's blueprint since it's come into the Premier League has probably been based on, a lot of that business model's based on away fans. Some folk won't like hearing that. They won't like hearing it, they'll ask why, but at the end of the day, that probably makes up for 33% of our turnover in terms of the away allocation.
The news comes as Livy continue to battle for their Premiership survival. 10 points adrift with 7 games left after their 3-0 defeat by the champions.
Been here since my 10th season. It's my 10th season at Livingston. And I'll just use this season. I got up for match day one. Match day 1, I come in to win that next game of football. That's not going to change in match day 38, whatever that situation is. I don't come into work to get beat. I don't get up to come in to train the players to get beat, to lose games of football. So my position, my thought process, my mindset isn't going to change.
Martindale's men welcome Aberdeen to West Lothian on Saturday. Motherwell are one step closer to fresh investment after reaching an agreement with a US-based investor. The Fir Park club have confirmed talks with an American family will proceed to the next stage. It comes after the Steelmen released a mock Hollywood appeal urging A-list celebrities such as Taylor Swift to provide funding. Derek McInnes admits there will be a twinge of disappointment around Kilmarnock if they do not clinch a European spot this season. The Ayrshire side secured their place in the top 6 following a 1-1 draw against Hearts at Tynecastle last Saturday. With 7 games remaining, Kelly are 4th, 2 points ahead of St Mirren.
We're looking for more now, we're just looking for what's next, and thankfully we've got an opportunity now where we can, if we do our jobs the way we've done it over the last few months, if we do that again over the next couple of months, then we've got a chance to maybe get the club into Europe. And you know, if we don't make Europe, then there will be a wee tinge of disappointment, and when there shouldn't be.
That's all your sport tonight, folks. Rahman is back tomorrow.
Thanks, Ronnie. Now here's Sean with the weather.
Light winds rolling in from the west. We'll be joined by some very welcomed ice creams. TUI sponsors STV weather.
Very good evening to you. We've got quite a temperature contrast developing the next couple of days. 6 degrees Celsius here tomorrow, 15 across London. But by the time we get to Friday, our temperature's probably around Glasgow up to about 8 or 9 degrees Celsius, 20 in the southeast of England. But by the time we get to the weekend, we're all much milder. But the reason for that is because we've got very windy conditions coming in from the west, potentially stormy conditions in the northwest of the country. Certainly unseasonably windy through the weekend. But yes, it will be a lot milder, but it will stay very showery, especially on Saturday. Now, temperatures tonight will drop down to about 3 or 4 degrees Celsius, which is only a few degrees down on where we've been this afternoon. Quite disappointing for many of us this afternoon with the cloud and the outbreaks of rain, especially in central and eastern parts. But most of that rain through the night clearing away to the east. And tomorrow, well, it should be a little bit better. The map brightening up a little bit for us as well, especially around the Hebrides, the west coast. The cloud breaking up to give us some sunny spells. We should see that developing across central parts too. So a much better day for many of us tomorrow. Still on that cooler side, 7 or 8 degrees Celsius, maybe up to highs of 10 degrees as we head into western parts of Argyll and also across Ayrshire. Heavy rain coming in on Friday, the milder air moving in from the south as well. Temperatures maybe 13 degrees South Lanarkshire and also around East Ayrshire, but plenty of wet weather around Saturday and Sunday. Lots of showers, but as I say, especially on Saturday, and also windy with gales at times too. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors STV weather.
And finally, it's a secret bunker whose whereabouts has been open for the past 2 decades. Nestled at the tip of North Ayrshire's coast, the Skelmorley secret bunker served as an outpost during the Cold War.
It was decommissioned from active service in 1991 and transformed into a free museum in 2004. Well, our reporter Brandon Cook was granted special access as it prepares to open later in the month for its 20th year.
On the back road between Skelmorley and Largs is a location which was once classified. The Skelmerley secret bunker, as it's now known, is one of around 200 nuclear monitoring posts across Scotland built during the Cold War. Frank, how are you doing?
Good afternoon. Welcome to 23 Post Skelmerley.
Thank you very much.
Otherwise it's known as Skelmerley Secret Bunker.
Frank Alexander was stationed here before it was decommissioned in 1991. In 2004, he restored it as a public museum. This year marks its 20th anniversary.
When I started the project back in 2003 by taking over the lease from the local landowner, I wasn't expecting to be here 20 odd years later. So it's been a labour of love over that last 20 years. During that time we've had thousands of visitors from all around the world here to see what we've got to offer them, to show them an insight into the workings of the Royal Observer Corps during the Cold War.
15 foot below the surface, the climb down isn't for the faint-hearted. Inside, service personnel from the Royal Observer Corps stood ready to alert the country to any nuclear attack. Inside the bunker, you get a real sense of what it must have been like for those working here during the Cold War. It really was a time where anyone inside here had to be prepared to deliver the worst news. The bunker was designed to fit 2 to 4 people with enough food and water to last 2 to 3 weeks. In the end, the bunk beds were never used. This was in service during decades of East-West tensions, where the prospect of a Soviet nuclear attack from behind the Iron Curtain was feared likely. Thankfully, it never came to that, but the team here recreates what that scenario would have sounded like.
Attack warning red.
And that's what we would have heard if the worst happened.
That should it have come to it, all the broadcast receivers would have heard that speech broadcast with the attack warning red.
In its 2 decades, the museum has collected hundreds of items from the time and created its own above-ground replica of the bunker. As it prepares to open for its 20th summer, the team of volunteers hope many more people will come to relive a time which was once highly secret. Brandon Cook, STV News, Skelmerley.
Oh, tucked away from it all. Maybe that's where John is for his Easter holidays.
You just never know, Kellyanne. Good night.
Good night.